He didn't have enough weird lawyers at the Four Seasons Total Landscaping Law Firm. Sorry, folks, we do this live and it's improv.
Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Good night and good luck.
Hey folks, it's Rick. Welcome to the Elephant in the Room. We were in DC this week for a couple of days. We had a bunch of fundraising stuff to do for the final push. We had a team meeting for the final push, and I had a speech last night with Molly Jong-Fast. It was great. We had a good time talking about the pro-democracy movement. And we're in DC, and that sort of led me to a moment today where, after reading the entire filing that came out in the Jack Smith case, I realized that the place I'm standing right now, the place I'm standing at this very moment in front of the U.S. Capitol, was a battleground on January 6, 2021. This was a combat zone that day. And it was a combat zone because Donald Trump sent a terrorist attack of his mob up the mall to this building, to these steps. You can't really see it anymore because the security fences that have been put up after that day have made this building something very different. But the criminal conspiracy that led those people here to attack this building was brought out into plain sight once again this week in this filing by Jack Smith. And that filing and that discussion and that conspiracy is the elephant in the room. So this was a battlefield right here. This was where Donald Trump and his people dispatched their, and look, I call it a terrorist attack because there have been, in our lifetimes, 2 planned terrorist attacks on this building. Osama bin Laden planned one on 9/11 and failed due to the bravery of the people on Flight 93. The terrorist attack that happened here on January 6, 2021 was planned from the White House. Not from a cave in Afghanistan, not from Abbottabad, Pakistan. It was planned right down the street, right down Pennsylvania Avenue at 1600, where Donald Trump decided and his conspirators decided they were going to overthrow an election. They were going to do it by violence and force if they couldn't win it in court. And when they lost it in court, they went to Plan B, and Plan B happened right here. Plan B happened right here, where people put a gibbet on this lawn and started chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," because Trump was tweeting Mike Pence lacked the courage. Right here. This is a battlefield.
Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence! Hang Mike 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 Pence!
And it's shameful. It's something that has turned this building into something of an armed camp. There was a time when I started working in Washington, I know it was a long time ago, there was a time up until 2021 where civilians, where Americans could walk in this building. They could see their representatives. They could talk to their senators. Now, as you can see, it is surrounded by security barriers. These barriers came to you courtesy of Donald Trump and his criminal conspiracy. This building is a sacred temple of American democracy. This temple that for 100 years, 150 years since it was finished after the Civil War, has been something that Americans looked at with pride. And there's a group of Americans now who look at this building and say, it's occupied by people we hate. There's a group of Americans that look at this building and say, the enemy is inside. And those folks are profoundly anti-small d democratic. This isn't about partisan or policy debates or any of that sort of thing. This is about people who have forgotten and given up on the American dream and the American system. It's unforgivable, honestly. I look at this building. I worked in this building. I briefed people in this building 100 times when I was in government. I visited friends and clients here hundreds of times. And now it is a different world. The world of magnetometers, the world of security fences, the world of a fear that a mob could storm up the National Mall, could walk up from the ellipse in front of the White House, could come here to this Capitol armed.
USA! 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 USA!
We were fortunate in one regard, that very, very few of the people there had guns. We were very fortunate in that regard. Because if they had, it would have been a different outcome. We still had this building sullied. We still had this building soiled by these people. I still look at it and I marvel at the cowardice of the men and women, particularly on this side, on the Senate side, who were well clear that if the mob had found Mitch McConnell or Mitt Romney or Susan Collins or anybody else that they think was to the right or to the left of Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, they would have killed them. They would have killed them. That's what mobs do. They're not just meant to intimidate. They're meant to kill. They're meant to cause damage. They're meant to do violence to people. And the fact of the matter is the violence that was done here was deliberate, it was planned, it was directed. None of this is coincidental. None of this is a mistake. And I want to walk a little further because we can't really see it very well right now, but those walls right there in the corner, where you see those lamp posts up there, that's where people were climbing up to make one of the initial breaches into this building.
Let's go! You guys are savage! Let's go! Let's go!
And on some scaffolding on the other side is where they tore down American flags and replaced them with Trump flags. And to my mind, that's not the definition of patriotism or even of a political statement. That's a sign of treason. That's a sign where you've taken a sacred symbol of America and thrown it to the ground and replaced it with a Donald Trump flag. Look, I recognize that a lot of Republicans believe they have a monopoly on patriotism. But if you throw an American flag to the ground to replace it with something, a Chinese nylon flag with Donald Trump's name on it, you're not an American. You're not a patriot. You're a Trump guy, but you're not a patriot.
I need police support!
They've had to secure the entire area. They've had to turn this into something it never was before. And when those people mounted the West Front, because that's where every 4 years in January, a president is sworn in, right up there, right up on that platform. And it's happened so many times that we all recognize the scene. The members of Congress, the Supreme Court justices, everybody behind them, the former president, the former first lady, the former vice president, the former second lady or second gentleman, they sit there and the winner of the election walks out, puts his hand on the Bible, and maybe very soon her hand on the Bible, and swears the oath of office. And every time until Trump, every single time until Donald Trump, that oath of office meant something. It told every American, it said to every person in this country, we understand we have differences. We understand we have totally different, sometimes philosophies and ideologies, but that the system that makes it possible for us to live together in peace, the system that makes it possible for us to have those ideologies and not be in a state of constant civil war, was challenged that day. From January 6th, and frankly, from Election Day in 2020 to January 6th, we were in a period of cold civil war. January 6th, that war got hot. Right here where I am standing, there were rioters, there were protesters who were storming this building with baseball bats, with bear spray, with sticks, with tire irons. And the assault on this building is a scar. And again, the scar is in part in the form of all these fences, all this security, but it's also in our hearts about what this was. This was a place where you could address your members of Congress. You could walk into a congressman's office, sit down to the secretary and say, hey, I need to see Congressman Smith about road building in our district. Now you have to go through security. Now you have to go through magnetometers. Now you have to be vetted and checked. Why? Because idiots stormed this building directed by an evil conspiracy. And I use the word evil advisedly. Like, people always say, oh, evil is like something more metaphysical. No. Evil is directing violence against your opponents, against your political opponents, your personal opponents. And evil is turning a symbol of America into something that became a symbol of violence and bloodshed. I hate what they've done to this building. This building means something. When you walk through that rotunda and look up, you will see the history of this country. When you walk through these halls, you will see the history of this country in its political and its patriotic glory. A man with a Camp Auschwitz shirt storms this building. A man who takes a shit in the rotunda. A man with a horned helmet on, buck naked, goes and sits in the chair in the Senate chamber. People with intentions that are so far off from American patriotism, it's almost indescribable, assaulted this building. If you tell me at any point, oh, January 6th, we got to put it behind us, nobody cares about January 6th, I know who you are. I know what you are. You know the guilt that he has for it. You know the guilt that you have for it. Because if you're excusing it now, you almost certainly excuse it at that moment. If you excused it now and excused it then, you're going to excuse it if it happens again. And that's who you are now. That's what you are now. And if you don't believe that's what you are now, you have to really look inside yourself and ask what happens when Donald Trump once again says to every Republican, invalidate this election, and goes to court and says invalidate this election, and it doesn't work. And then when he comes to Washington and stands on the mall somewhere and tells a huge crowd of people, go to the Capitol, storm it, seize it, take it.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
There are a lot of Republicans we warned in 2020. We said, are you going to cross that Rubicon? Are you going to do this thing? Are you going to go out here and listen to Donald Trump and deny the truth of a free and fair election? And a lot of them said, we'll play it by ear. We'll see how it goes. Let me tell you, the Senate that day during the certification was in a sort of a deadlock. You had a big group of Republicans, guys like Ted Cruz, guys like Josh Hawley, guys like Mike Lee, all of whom were trying to find a way to invalidate the certification. That moment when the Capitol was attacked, they wanted to see how it came out. They were waiting to see what happened. They were waiting to see if it was going to work. Because I will tell you something, if they had found the certification documents that day, guys like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and Tom Cotton and Josh Hawley would have said, well, we're going to have a do-over. We have to go back and recertify. And there would have been an eternal question over the election. It would have been the first time in history we did a do-over in a national election. It's not what we do or need to do in this country. We have good and secure elections in this country. It's just a lie that our elections are corrupt or fraudulent or insecure. It's just a lie. It's not true. I want to say one more thing about this while we're walking here. And I'm not going to use their names because they've already both gotten an enormous, horrifying amount of harassment and death threats. The Oath Keepers and the 3%ers, the guys in full body armor and the tactical gear and the radios and all that, when they stormed this building, it wasn't just to go in and have shenanigans. It wasn't just to go in and swing from the rafters. They were looking for the clerk's office. They were looking for the place where the certification documents were stored. and again, I'm not going to use their names because they've already been harassed to the ends of the earth. But 2 young women, 2 staffers, I would say they probably make $50,000 a year. They're young DC, they want to be successful in this town. They want to come here. They want to work. They want to be in the hustle of Congress and the amazing feeling that you get as a young person working in DC. I will tell you, I was that person. It's great. It's amazing. Those 2 young women grabbed the satchels in which the certification documents were held, and they moved them. They secured the bag. They got them out of the way of the mob. And when the mob got to the clerk's office, and it's not an easy lift, right? This is not something your average moke who walks through this door goes, oh, we'll turn left here, turn right here, turn left, go up. No. They knew what they were looking for. These young women got it out of there before they could get to the certification documents. They are heroes of this country. If those documents had gone missing, the election would have truly been in doubt. So there was a lot of heroism that day. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Capitol Police here. There were hundreds and hundreds of DC police here. They put their lives on the line when a violent mob was charging this building. They weren't doing it to protect a party. They weren't doing it to protect Joe Biden. They were doing it to protect this country. This is a sacred place in this country. And the fact that we had to have hundreds of injured cops from the party that backs the blue on this Capitol, it's so repugnant to me and so morally insufficient the way we've reacted to it that it still strikes me as something as sort of a failure of our citizenship. We needed to look at this more intensely. There's a lot of people in jail right now for this lie of Trump's and this conspiracy of Trump's. There should be more. Very few of the ringleaders, the plotters, the planners, the schemers, and especially not the guy at the top of the conspiracy, Donald Trump. Very few of those people have gone to jail. The foot soldiers went to jail. The guys beating up cops, rightly, went to jail. Sometimes for 2 years, sometimes for 6 years. A couple for some real sentences, like Stuart Rhodes, the Oath Keepers. He's gonna die in prison because he's gonna be an old man when he gets out, if at all. But that idea that the foot soldiers here on the Trump side were willing to attack Capitol Police and DC police with enormous violence, with enormous anger and violence. It's because they're part of a movement that doesn't believe in this building, this place, or this country.
Breaking news, a bombshell court filing just unsealed in the 2020 election case against former President Donald Trump.
So the filing that Judge Chutkan revealed Wednesday night was a 165-page document that Jack Smith had submitted to the court. It was somewhat redacted, but not entirely redacted, and it contained a step-by-step, moment-by-moment, name-by-name recitation of exactly the Trump conspiracy to overthrow the United States government and to overthrow the 2020 election. What did we see in that? We saw that from the beginning, Trump knew it was a fraud. He knew it was a lie. He knew that he had not won the election. He understood it from the very start. But he was surrounded by people. He was surrounded by enablers, men and women who decided that their country and the oath that every single one of those people should swear as a citizen of this country to maintain and uphold the Constitution, to be citizens of a nation that depends on the rule of law, that depends on the peaceful transfer of power, that depends on the Constitution, depends on a sense that if you lose an election, you've lost the election. Trump knew he had not been cheated. He knew his claims of illegals voting and of manipulated ballots and of chicanery and shenanigans were all BS from the very beginning. He knew it from the start. You know who else knew it? His lawyers knew it. They knew it from the start. Now, in the beginning, he had the clown crew of Sidney Powell and Cheeseborough and all these weirdos. To top that off, he brought in Rudy Giuliani.
Wow!
Those lawyers knew it was a fraud. They knew from the beginning that their cases were going to go nowhere. But they went in and they lied in the courts. They lied to the American people. They even lied to them, to their own team, trying to keep Trump happy, trying to show him progress that could never be achieved. You know why they lost 62 cases? Because they never had a case. There was never evidence that Donald Trump was cheated out of this election. He still isn't. And in this filing, what do you see? You see people like Mike Roman, one of his aides, a deputy campaign manager, go out, and when he's told something's not working out his way, and one of the people he's corresponding with says, well, these people might riot. He says, make them riot. Do it. When you see people like Ronna McDaniel, when Trump tells her, you've got to go out and get me this evidence out of Michigan that these voting machines were manipulated, and she comes back and says, Donald, that's fucking crazy. And yet they still pursue it. You see this over and over again in this indictment. You see Donald Trump when he is told that Mike Pence has been taken to a secure location with his security detail because of threats against his life, as a mob storms this lawn right out here, storms up this lawn right here and up the steps of the Capitol. Donald Trump said, so what? You see the correspondence between Donald Trump and all these different people, whether he's tweeting about things, whether he's getting briefings from people, whether he's talking to Steve Bannon the night before, and then Steve Bannon goes out on his podcast on January 6th and on January 5th and says, tomorrow all hell will break loose. A few minutes after he speaks to Trump on the phone.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
Trump was the head of a criminal conspiracy. Trump was the head of a criminal conspiracy that was directed at one big objective. That objective was to make sure that the votes of the 50 states were not certified so that he could delay the election, the results, so that he could delay having the reality set in that Joe Biden was actually going to be president because he beat him fair and square. And Joe Biden didn't just beat him by a little. He beat him by a pretty good historical margin. Not the biggest we've seen, but damn significant. It was never going to flip. But the idea that eventually grew in Trump's mind was that if they could make sure that the ballots didn't get certified, if they could work with their conspirators in the Senate, people like Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz and Tommy Tuberville and Cindy Hyde-Smith and Josh Hawley and Tom Cotton, all these other folks, they thought if they could delay that enough, something with the pressure they'd bring by a giant mob out here would work. They thought that if they could find the ballots, if they could find the actual certification documents from the states during that riot, they would be able to delay this election. You find they planned this from the start. You'll find they coordinated. The Stop the Steal movement was not just a group of politically interested Trump supporters. It was a criminal conspiracy. It was a criminal conspiracy from the very beginning. This is outlined once again. We've seen this in the January 6 hearings, which opened the floodgates of this. This FBI file, or this Department of Justice filing, shows you much more granular detail, much more information about the TikTok, the timeline, the moment-by-moment play that happened here. This is something that I think there's been a sort of move in reporting and in the consulting world to say, oh, well, January 6th doesn't matter. Oh, that's in the past. It's just, it does, we should be talking about prescription drug prices or whatever. And none of it makes sense if you take away the idea that we have a historical risk in this country. You've got a guy who's planning to do this again. How did Trump do it? We see in the indictment that he started lying about the election being stolen before the election was done. He started lying about the election being stolen well in advance. He was priming the pump. He was priming the pump so that the criminal conspiracy that he built and led, not as president, but as a candidate. And by the way, I want to take a slight diversion here. People are like, oh, well, the get out of jail free immunity ruling of the Supreme Court, isn't he free to go? Isn't this just nothing? No. What we see in this revised filing is that Trump is dealing not with government staff, not with government lawyers, but with his personal political staff, his campaign, his private associates, his private attorneys. He is not dealing with this as president. The immunity thing, I think, has been ably dispatched by Jack Smith in this filing. He has drawn a narrower, but I think, in fact, some ways more compelling indictment against Trump for the criminal conspiracy that he led in attempting to overthrow the election. The thought that you've got Donald Trump doing this again, The fact that you've got him right now saying if the election is stolen, when the election is stolen, it's going to be crooked. They're manipulating the ballots. If you have him do that again, if you have him starting that now, what do you think is going to happen in this race? What do you think is going to happen on election night if it's not a blowout? If we understand the terrain, you need to also. The terrain is this. Kamala Harris is doing very well. The numbers are moving in the right direction. If we win Pennsylvania, where the Lincoln Project is heavily invested, we will run an amazing election night if we win Pennsylvania. Donald Trump has to sweep the board if we take Pennsylvania. But there's a lot of work ahead. And you have to recognize that the scope of the victory that we're able to pull off depends on you. The scope of the victory is going to make a big difference in whether we have an election night where Donald Trump immediately declares that the election was stolen, and we go right back to the time where a mob stormed this building, killed people, assaulted cops, burned the idea of peaceful transfers of power, burned out that 240-year history of peaceful transfers of power. We've got to win big on election night for a very simple reason: peaceful transfer of power. If we don't, we're going to be right back where we were. This conspiracy it's outlined so well in this document, and the people that were parts of it are still in Trump's orbit, still in his world. Steve Bannon's going to be out of jail in 27 days, and if you don't think he's going to be helping Trump engineer a coup if Trump loses, you are mistaken. All these folks that the last time around were kind of low-rent weirdos, the Sidney Powells and the John Eastmans and all the other dipshits around Trump, they've been replaced by much smarter people. They were replaced by real attorneys, not these clowns, not these jokers. They've been replaced by people who understand that Donald Trump's objective to be president is to keep him out of jail and to give him power like no president in American history has ever had before. It's on us to fix this problem. It's on us to face this problem. It's on us to beat this guy at a level, as he likes to say, that has never been seen before. We've got to go out and treat that filing last night as a warning. We've got to treat that filing as a bright flare up in the sky that tells us that unless we win and win big, he's going to do this all over again. And that, folks, is the elephant in the room.
Good night and good luck.